The Galactic Council chamber had seen many historic moments in its 3,000-year history, but none quite like this. Elara stood at the central podium, her holographic display flickering with tactical readouts and star charts, completely oblivious to the tiny bundle of fur that had nestled against her left shoulder. The human xenobiologist had been mid-sentence, explaining the migratory patterns of the Void Walker species, when she felt the soft weight settle against her collarbone. Rin, the Vexian cub who had been perched on the edge of her chair, had apparently decided that Elara's lecture on deep space fauna was the perfect lullaby. The small creature no larger than an Earthhouse cat, with silvery fur that shimmered like starlight and oversized ears that twitched even in sleep, had climbed up. Elara sighed with the casual confidence of someone who knew they'd be welcomed. Now, tiny paws clutched at the fabric of her uniform jacket, and soft, whistling breaths warmed the side of her neck. Elara paused mid-word, her eyes widening slightly. The assembled delegates' representatives from 47 star systems, each more imposing than the last, stared at her, with expressions ranging from shock to carefully concealed amusement. The Vexian ambassador, a towering figure with the same silvery fur as young Rin but battle-scarred and graying, sat frozen in her seat, her triple-jointed fingers gripping the armrests. Elara began, then thought better of it. Moving suddenly might wake Rin, and given what she'd learned about Vexian culture in her 3 months aboard the council station, that would be inadvisable. The Vexians were apex predators from a death world that made Earth look like a garden paradise. Their planet, Vex Prime, had gravity twice that of standard, temperatures that swung from boiling to freezing within hours, and predators that hunted in packs of hundreds. The Vexians had clawed their way to the top of their food chain through sheer ferocity and had brought that same intensity to their spacefaring civilization. But they had one sacred, immutable rule: never, under any circumstances, disturb a sleeping cub. It was tied to their evolutionary history. Cubs slept only when they felt absolutely safe. And that safety was so precious, so rare in their violent world, that disturbing it was considered one of the gravest offenses. Wars had been fought over less. Diplomatic relations had crumbled when an unwitting ambassador had made the mistake of moving a sleeping Vexian infant from a chair. Elara stood perfectly still, her presentation forgotten. The holographic display continued to rotate behind her, showing the ethereal forms of voidwalkers drifting through nebulae, but no one was looking at it anymore. The Vexian delegate, a crystalline being whose body chimed softly when he moved, leaned toward his neighbor. "The human doesn't know, does she?" he whispered, his voice like wind through crystal caves. "She knows," rumbled Ambassador Kessa, the Vexian representative. The massive warrior's eyes were fixed on Elara with an intensity that would have terrified most species. She stayed still immediately. The question is whether she panicked. Humans were still new to the Galactic Council. They'd been spacefaring for barely a century, their ships cobbled together from stolen technology and sheer audacity. They were fragile. Their bones broke easily, their skin tore, their planets could barely support them without careful environmental controls. Most species saw them as a curiosity at best, a liability at worst. But Elara didn't panic. Instead, she did something that made Ambassador Kessa's ears stand straight up in surprise. She smiled soft, genuine, and completely unconcerned, and very carefully adjusted her stance to better support Rin's weight. Then, without missing a beat, she continued her lecture. "As I was saying," Elara said, her voice dropping to a gentler volume, "the Void Walkers have developed a unique form of communication that transcends traditional sensory input. They navigate the cosmic winds using what we believe to be quantum entanglement between individuals in their pods." She spoke for another 20 minutes, her right hand manipulating the holographic controls while her left arm came up slowly, instinctively, to cradle the sleeping cub against her. Rin, deep in dreams, made a small chirping sound and burrowed closer, tiny claws kneading contentedly against Elara's shoulder. The delegates watched in silent fascination. This human, this fragile, soft creature from a world with barely any natural defenses, stood before the Council's most powerful beings while holding one of the galaxy's most dangerous species as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. When Elara finally concluded her presentation, she looked up to find every eye in the chamber fixed on her. The silence stretched. "Right," she said carefully, glancing down at the still sleeping Rin. "I don't suppose anyone has a suggestion for what I should do here?" Ambassador Kessa rose from her seat, moving with the deadly grace of her species. Several delegates tensed, hands moving toward weapons or defensive positions. The Vexian warrior crossed the chamber floor in long strides, and Alara's heartbeat quickened despite her calm exterior. Kessa stopped before the podium, and for a moment, human and Vexian simply regarded each other. Then, the ambassador did something unprecedented. She placed one massive clawed hand over her heart in a gesture of deepest respect. "You may keep her there until she wakes naturally," Kessa said, her voice rough with emotion. "It is a great honor that she chose you. The young ones have instincts we adults sometimes forget. They know who is safe." "I'm honored," Alara replied softly, meaning it. "Though I should probably warn you, I have 2 more lectures scheduled today. And a meeting with the Crystalline Collective at 1700 hours. A sound rippled through the chamber, laughter in a dozen different forms. The tension broke like shattered glass. "Then I suggest you get comfortable, Dr. Alara," Kessa said, and for the first time since humanity had joined the council, she smiled. "You're not going anywhere for a while." And so it was that the Galactic Council's afternoon session proceeded with a human xenobiologist, conducting sensitive negotiations with various ambassadors, all while a Vexian cub dozed peacefully on her shoulder, occasionally making small chirping sounds that made even the most hardened warriors in the room soften their expressions. Later, when Rin finally woke 3 hours and 2 diplomatic incidents later, and scrambled down with the embarrassed energy of someone who'd overslept, Ambassador Kessa approached Alara privately. "My people have a saying," the warrior said. "The measure of a species is not in their claws or their weapons, but in how they treat the young and the vulnerable when no one is forcing them to be gentle." Alara adjusted her uniform, working out the kinks from standing still so long. "We have something similar on Earth. Something about the character of a society being judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members." Kessa's ears twitched a Vexian smile. "Perhaps your species and mine have more in common than we thought, Dr. Alara." "Perhaps we do, Ambassador. And in a galaxy full of warriors and conquerors, of species built for survival and dominance." It was a small moment of unexpected gentleness that opened doors no amount of military might ever could.